I just want to complain. This movie was supposed to be R18 here, but they cut it down to an R16, not by removing any of the violence, but by removing the one sex scene. And this baffles me because what they did with The Wolf of Wall Street was that they just released it in two versions, an R16, R18. I don't know why they can't just keep doing that. So, for those who have seen this in other countries, please tell me if I missed anything. 300 Rise of an Empire is directed by Noam Murro and written by Zack Snyder and Kurt Johnstad. This movie stars Sullivan Stapleton, Eva Green, and returning as their roles Lena Headey and Rodrigo Santoro. Now the cool thing about 300 Rise of an Empire is that it's more of like a spin-off. It's more of like a parallel piece to 300 than it is like a sequel or a prequel. Because when this movie starts, chronologically speaking, it starts before the events of 300. When it ends after the events of 300. So it's interesting. Rise of an Empire follows Themistocles, who is this Athenian general, like he's a navy captain or something, and he's pretty much fighting his own battles with the Persian army. And this Persian army is being led by Eva Green's character, Artemisia, who is of Greek blood, but she fights for the Persians for like revenge against the Greeks. And this movie does pretty much just follow their own exploits against the Persians. Rise of an Empire is a really frustrating movie because there's so many opportunities for it to go right and just does not go right. For one, that whole parallel timeline thing, it's really interesting, and then the fact that this really revolves around naval battles could have been like amazing, but it's just not. I really do appreciate the uniqueness though. I mean, I can see what they're trying to do. I can see how this story really is a departure from 300, but I thought in terms of style and directing and stuff, it really departed a bit too much. It would have been nicer to be a bit more 300, you know, like the good stuff that made 300 what it was. Like, I think they needed to retain that here. Rise of an Empire isn't a straight up bad movie, but it's really disappointing. First of all the production values seem to have taken a step down for some reason. This is like 7 years after 300, and the effects just look worse. And to be fair, there's more of it. Like, this story really demanded more visual effects, and it's telling a story at a bigger scale, but still the visual effects just do not really look good. The green screen is more obvious when they do a wide shot and shows like a lot of Greeks. It just does, like, you can tell the ones at the back are just computer animated. It didn't feel like in the actual 300 where it feels like they actually got a huge crowd of people. Cinematography also takes a step down. No more of those cool wide shots where you get like slow-mo action. And also the sound also took a step down. It doesn't feel like that weighty anymore. In fact, because of the step down in these things, the production design also takes a step down, because in the first 300, the simplicity of the production design was masked by the way it was shot, the stylized visuals, but now because it's not like that anymore, you can tell that a lot of this looks really fake, unfortunately. Fakest of which is the blood. I don't know what they did with the blood. I don't know why they didn't stick with how the blood was in the original 300, which is kind of like flecks of black and red and just, you know, really subtle. But here they make the blood like really thick and like they feel like bubbles coming out of people, and just it never I never got used to it the entire movie. Heck, even Ephialtes doesn't look real. The Hunchback, like back in 300, you could believe this guy was like this deformed Hunchback. Here, he just looks like a dude with prosthetics on. Ultimately, Rise of an Empire suffers because there's way too much going on. Like, I can kind of understand why. This is based on Frank Miller's Xerxes, which is an unpublished graphic novel, and I can kind of see why it was unpublished because I think it needs a bit more work. There's just way too much going on, and because there's too much going on, it really does feel slow for most of the movie. Also, I don't know why his graphic novel would be entitled Xerxes when this isn't really about Xerxes. You get a bit of like how he became Xerxes, but ultimately it doesn't really. It's pretty much useless. Like, it doesn't matter how he became Xerxes. However, like I said, this movie isn't all bad. Like, I will still admit that the plot is very interesting the way it was. It just needed like better execution, better direction, and I think the writing is still decent. You know, it just doesn't have as many quotes as 300, but you know, same writers as the first one, and they do the dialogue is still, you know, listenable. However, like the first 300, there's still like not really that much character depth, and I know some people might be saying that the very different nature of this movie is due to the fact that they're not Spartans anymore. It's not as badass. But why isn't there character depth then? I mean, you know, Leonidas still felt like flesh and blood despite his, you know, badassery. But here, the characters aren't necessarily fleshed out again. One of my complaints with 300 I forgot to mention was the fact that it didn't really feel like a big army of 300. It really just felt like Leonidas leading a bunch of backup soldiers. Here, it does feel like the same thing, and like that's a bit more unforgivable here because this is a bigger army. However, Sullivan, Stapleton, and Eva Green, they are definitely the best parts of this movie. The relationship is very, very interesting, and they both play their roles very well. Stapleton, he's not really supposed to be a Leonidas ripoff, and I really appreciated that. He became his own kind of character. Lots of people have been raving about Eva Green's performance, and I think it's like that insanely good. But it was fun to see her in this kind of role. The coolest thing about the relationship is that they keep fighting these naval skirmishes with each other. That by the time they get to the point where they actually fight each other, it really feels like this epic matchup. This is what I realized that Rise of an Empire has that 300 did not have, which is a personal conflict, and it's so great to see that because you can just feel tension between these two. In that regard, Rise of an Empire really does get better as it goes on. It starts out pretty messy, and then as soon as they start developing these two characters, like it starts getting interesting. By the end, it really, really is awesome. All the fighting gets better and whatnot. And my friend also just wanted me to mention that this guy is in it. His name is apparently Jack O'Connell. I have no comment. I'm sorry. Anyway, despite like this few good things that Rise of the Empire pulls off, I just really do think that it's the director here who just did not really know how to handle this material that well. Like, I appreciate again the fact he was going for a unique thing here, but he would have, benefited from kind of taking Snyder's approach. So in the end, Rise of the Empire is really just this big ball of meh. I do think it's a jump in the right direction for this franchise. Hopefully, it's a franchise, but it didn't really land very well. I do feel like there's so much more story to tell though, and I really wish like Snyder could come back to direct another one because I want more. So yes, that's my review for 300 Rise of an Empire. What did you guys think of it? Have you seen this? Have you seen the original 300? What did you think was better? Whatever you think, whether you agree with me or not, please leave me a comment. Let's have a conversation.